to another day of Treats on the Streets. My name is Gavin, and today we have some errands to run. And as every responsible concealed carry permit holder should be doing, today we're packing. This is a Ruger LCP Custom, a little 380. I like it because it fits right in my pocket. Anyways, we gotta pick up some wood, and we gotta pick up some tools of Harbor Freight, so let's get going. My baby. So today we're gonna be taking the truck because it has been raining outside. It stopped for now, which is good because we're gonna be working on the car in a minute. But I don't want it to be dripping all over me when I'm working on it, sitting underneath it. So we're gonna take the truck. I wanna make you guys a deal. If this video gets 24 likes in the first 24 hours, I will buy an E46 M3 manual transmission 6-speed and swap it in the E36 M3. If you think that might be interesting to see and you guys want to see it, smash that like button and we'll get it done. 24 likes in the first 24 hours. You guys want to hear what a 5-cylinder sounds like? Oh man. Did you know that these trucks come with inline 5-cylinders? It smells so good. And now we are off to Harbor Freight. I have to admit something. Even though the tools here are really, really cheap, I still spend way too much money here. And here is today's purchase. Some extensions and some of these universal joints. I really only needed this extension, but they don't sell them on their own, so you have to buy the whole pack. Okay, so basically, the reason why I had to buy this piece of wood is because now that the car is lowered, the jack won't fit underneath the front, so I can lift it up, only lift it up once and put jack stands on both sides. So what I'm gonna do is build a couple planks, stack them on top of each other, a little staggered, so I can just drive up on that, and the car will be higher, and I can jack it up. So we're gonna use this little saw and get going making that thing. Try these out. See, the problem before was this was hitting the front lip right here, but now we're high enough. I should be able to get back far enough to lift up on that front cross member. This black thing right there. Definitely not left with much room to work with. You gotta be careful here, because I don't want to hit the X brace and I don't want to hit my power steering cooler either. Now that we have the car all off the ground, I figure it's about time to tell you what we're going to be doing today. So, what I have right here are some new polyurethane pistons. And how these pistons are designed are, there's metal on the top and the bottom, so when it's in the cylinder, this metal protects it from the heat so the polyurethane doesn't melt. And why we have the polyurethane is so that the pistons don't crack when you're pushing all that extra horsepower. And if you think polyurethane pistons are weird, the weirdest thing about these is they're actually motor mounts. In all seriousness, these are Vorschlag motor mounts. I got them for 199 bucks, came out to 210. I don't know how many people know this, but polyurethane is based off of 2 different ratings, A ratings and D ratings. And the A ratings are softer than the D ratings. Most of the stuff you're gonna see out there for polyurethane is gonna be about 75D or even higher. And I want something that was kind of in between. So I went with 95A, which is basically 50D. I didn't want something as soft as the OEM ones, which are rubber and they're oil filled. And I didn't want something hard that was gonna cause a lot of vibration. So hopefully we got a middle ground. I'll obviously let you guys know how that turns out. So what we have to do to get started on the installation of these motor mounts is first I have to remove the strut tower brace so that we have enough clearance to lift the engine up to replace the motor mounts. And we also have to remove this X brace so I can get access to the oil pan to jack up the engine. I don't want this thing to fall on my face. X brace is off. I think that ought to do it. Okay, so now onto the motor mounts themselves. If you don't know where these things are located, you see that kind of rubbery looking thing down there? That's the motor mount on the driver's side. The one on the passenger side is a bit easier to see. It's just directly below, right down there. So, what you have to do to get these motor mounts off is release the one nut on the top on this side, another one on the top on the other side, and there's one underneath on both sides as well. I can show you those real quick because they're just right under here. That right there is a nasty looking motor mount, and that's the bolt we have to get off. Now that I think of it, I actually should put some PV Blaster on there to get these things off a lot easier because they look pretty freaking rusted. So let's get this done so we can jack this motor up. Well, luckily for the bottoms, they're a lot easier to get to than the tops. You can see there's a little hole in the control arms you can go up through to get to those. Now for the tricky part, the top ones. And what you're gonna need to get this done to reach all the way down in there are a couple of extensions and a little U-joint. That's how I got to the one on the passenger side. Super long extensions and the little U-joint on the bottom. I got everything off now. So, oh, I don't know how well you can see. The bolt that's way down there gave me the hardest time. All right, guys, so as you can tell, today's a new day. I actually ran into some problems last night that I will describe to you in just a moment that made me not be able to finish the motor mounts until it was dark, and so I couldn't really film. So, just in case you are ever doing the motor mounts on your E36, when I jacked up the motor, the things that I had to loosen or to take off were this clip right here, which I think is for the ASC. And then also, the plastic is white from being stressed. That's because when I lifted the motor, this bracket here hit the reservoir and pushed it up against the brake booster, and this actually popped off. So when I got back underneath the car to put the X brace back on, I saw that there was fluid all over the ground, and I found out that that was why. So I popped it back on and just filled the reservoir back up. Luckily, no air got in my brake lines, so that's all good to go. But the problems that I ran into, so because you have to use so many crazy extensions to get down into here, the deep socket wasn't fitting very well, so I used the shallow one, and I ended up almost rounding out that bolt. And so it took me a long time to get it off. I ended up being able to use the deep socket and get it off. So if you're gonna do this yourself, make sure to use a deep socket because it works a lot better. Let me show you guys what the old ones looked like. They were pretty haggard. So I can tell that these suckers were bad. They're super rusty. All the rubber starts peeling around the edges. Let's go for a drive. Oh man. All right guys, a few things to consider here. So most of the time when you think of service intervals, if I were to ask you, how often should you change your oil? You're gonna say something like every 3,000 miles, every 5,000 miles. If I say, how often should you change your transmission fluid? You're gonna say every 30,000 miles, every 60,000 miles. But what most people don't think about is that there are time requirements too. So if you don't drive 3,000 miles in a certain amount of time, be it 3 months, 6 months, whatever, usually service intervals have a mileage requirement and a time requirement. Most people just don't think about the time requirement because they drive the miles before that happens. But on a car that's low miles like this one that doesn't get driven very often, I'm noticing that there's a lot of things that should have been replaced because of the time, but weren't because of the mileage. And I think that motor mounts were one of them. I wouldn't be surprised if those motor mounts have been the same ones that were on the car when this thing left the factory. And 18 years later, that shouldn't be the case. So let's get into what I think about these motor mounts. So the first thing that I noticed right away is at idle, there is a little bit of more vibration. And I was kind of expecting that because when I read about polyurethane motor mounts, a lot of people were saying that the one thing that they did notice was there's a little bit more vibration at idle, and I do have that. Now, I do have to give a little bit of a disclaimer here. So the instructions that Vorslag gives for installing these motor mounts, they say to not torque them down to the stock torque specs, and what you should do is just start tightening them until you start to see the polyurethane bulge out, and at that point stop. Now, I forgot about that, and so I tightened them to 37, I think 37 or 36 foot-pounds of torque, which I think is too much. I realized that after I already tightened them down, and because you use lock nuts, you can't just back them off. You'd have to get new ones, or else you'd risk them coming loose. And so If it ever bugs me bad enough, I'll probably try that, but right now it's not really that big of a deal. The vibration really is not that bad. I can see some cars stock vibrating this much at idle. Right away, without even leaving the parking lot, I can tell that when I'm not idling, when I'm actually starting to go, that the vibration is actually less. Now, I don't know if that's because the polyurethane bushings help there to be less vibration when you're actually on the gas, or if it's just because mine were vibrating a lot because they were really old. But let me give it a little bit of juice here. Oh yeah, it's so much more smooth. When I'm flooring it, the best way for me to describe it is it just feels more buttery. The acceleration feels smoother, and even, yeah, I'm noticing that even when I'm shifting, especially like full throttle, like harder shifts, it does shift smoother. Now, people say that the 5-speed that comes in this car is hard to get the money shift, but I've also read that a good way to get rid of that, to make it easier to shift when you're going hard on the car, is to get motor mounts. And so I think I can second that. It is easier for me to throw down shifts. Oh yeah, after the motor mounts are put in. Oh man, yeah, they feel a lot better. There's a lot less slop when I'm going between gears. So say from first to second or from second to third, I used to hear and kind of feel that things were a little bit loose. And it was kind of confusing to me because my transmission mounts are actually polyurethane transmission mounts. They're upgraded. And so I thought, well, why does my transmission feel like it's moving all over the place when those are good? And it must have just been the motor mounts. That might seem kind of weird that you're putting on harder mounts than stock and it feels like it's smoother, but I'm just telling you that's the way that it is. All of these motions and things that I'm making, shifting, are not only, like I said, they just feel more buttery, but they're more precise too. Now, as far as normal driving, and especially hard driving, I personally don't really see any drawbacks of doing polyurethane motor mounts. Now, maybe if you would have gone with a harder grade of polyurethane, like the 75D instead of the 50D or 95A or whatever that these are, you know, maybe vibration would be a little more of a thing. But with these Vorslag ones, the red ones, yeah, there's really nothing but benefits once you're going. Like I mentioned before, the only drawback that I can think of is just that there's more vibration at idle. If you do drive a lot in traffic, you have a lot of stop and go stuff, that might be a little annoying to you, because I try to be pretty soft on the clutch when I'm starting out, and if I'm going really slow and not really hitting the gas, just kind of letting the clutch out to creep forward, it does kind of vibrate and shake stuff in the car, like in the dash and around the cup holders and stuff a little bit more too. What do you say we see about those shifts again? Oh yeah, definitely a lot better. One of the funnest thing about changing something on your car is being able to feel the difference that it makes, right? If you do a mod, you want to experience a change. Now, that wouldn't be very fun if you changed something, but you didn't really feel any change. So something that I'm finding that's really good about changing stuff on this E36 is things like bushings and the suspension and stuff. All that stuff is really old. So when I'm changing it, it just makes that much more of a difference, because the stock stuff or the previously modified stuff is a little tired. All in all, I definitely do recommend these Vorslag motor mounts. Shifts are smoother, they're a lot more precise, especially going from 4th to 5th gear. I can just do that motion much quicker and much smoother. Everything feels more buttoned down and tight, and definitely in a good way, and we got rid of a bunch of slop in the drivetrain. The install was fairly straightforward. If I had to do it again, you know, stuff's always easier the second time. If I had to do it again, I honestly could probably do the motor mounts in less than an hour and a half. Another thing that I did forget to mention is I have a slim electric fan and aftermarket radiator. I have heard that the OEM ones stick out a little bit further, and you may have to watch those for clearance when you're jacking up the motor. And luckily I didn't. Now, before we end today's video, I do want to give a little bit of a shout out to Mazda RX-7 FD 1993. Now, not only do you have good taste in cars, but I appreciate your comments, man. And when I'm getting feedback from you guys, it helps to let me know that videos like this, where I'm doing mods, are useful. So thanks again, man. Keep it up. And don't forget that if you like the video and you think stuff like this is helpful, to give it a thumbs up. Or if you want me to buy that E46 M3 6-speed transmission and swap it into this car, give it a thumbs up too. We gotta get 24 in 24 hours. As always, if this is your first time heading over to the channel, welcome, and you can click the logo behind my head to subscribe. And if you want to see more treats on the streets, you can click these videos here. And I will see you guys next time. Now get out there and